The only reason why we record these sessions is because I know there are people that not everybody can fit in this schedule and are interested in listening afterwards. Yeah. So I give it back to you, Katrina.
Okay, sounds excellent. Sorry, was that Megan?
Oh, sorry. PowerPoint.
I think you're on mute. Oh, no problem.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, Megan, you're putting it up. Yes, please. Thank you. I didn't hear who I was going to.
And just let me know when you want me to go to the next slide.
Okay, I appreciate it. And I see it up. So yeah, so the full name of this coalition is, as you can see, it's the Response, Recovery, and Resilience Investment Coalition. So you can probably understand why you'll hear me referring it to as R3 for short. I'll just go to the next slide. So I do want to keep this informal. I think we have a manageable group this afternoon. I'm very happy to answer questions along the way if you felt like jumping in, or I'll keep the chat function up as well if you wanted to shoot me a clarifying question. I honestly have a handful of slides, so this isn't intended to take a full hour by any means, but to hopefully give you the sufficient information and background on this new initiative that we launched only 3 weeks ago. I think the last time I spoke to Susanna, I said it felt like it was months ago that we launched it, just because of the momentum and the work that we've already done. But yes, and I do want to say thank you for all of you for joining, and also special thanks to Susanna for putting this together and being willing to have this conversation. Also Luciana, who had mentioned WeInvest when we connected a few weeks ago. So in terms of what I wanted to cover, wanted to make sure you understood the motivation behind Launch R3 Coalition, who some of the initial supporters were to get this off the ground, and those other organizations currently involved. Go over the objectives and our initial activities that we envision for the R3 Coalition. And then if you yourselves want to get engaged as investors, what the roles and expectations of that look like currently. And then I have down here a few group discussion questions, because as I said, I don't think this will take the full hour to review what the R3 Coalition is trying to achieve, as well as answer questions. I hope we have enough time, because it's clear that collectively this group has an amazing pulse of what's happening in terms of the financial markets and investing within the Latin American context. So to the extent that you wanted to share, among each other and also with me as we think about the R3 Coalition and the various topics, regions that we would cover, I very much would value that insight, either now in this group discussion, or I will leave my contact details also and share those, so that if you wanted to connect one-on-one, I'm happy to do that as well. But just for you to think about as you hear background on the R3 Coalition, what I would particularly like to understand a little bit more in detail is, for each of you, whether you're regionally focused, parts of Latin America, or specific country focused, what particular challenges have you seen, you specifically or the investor community, in light of the COVID crisis? Also understanding how you're managing your current investments, and specifically supporting those investees and entrepreneurs. And then lastly, and we can go beyond this, but just for prompting questions, how are you, or if you are able to pursue new investments, how do you go about that? If you're being faced potentially with travel restrictions, or if you want to accelerate your investments even faster, but there's some processes that you feel like you need to change. So just wanted to give you some food for thought there as we shift into later in this session. So I'll go to the next slide. I don't know if, oh, thank you. Yeah, so I won't spend too much time, but because everyone has seen the expansive effect of COVID-19, both from an that dual economic and health crisis that's caused. It's global, and it does require a global response. Our research team is putting together an issue brief that we're putting out hopefully in the next 2 weeks that's showing the landscape of impact investing and the challenges investors are facing. And they pulled some statistics, which some of you may have already heard, but just to really get us back to what we're being faced with. A Bloomberg article said that 92 billion of foreign investment has exited emerging markets. The World Food Program has estimated that 265 million people may face food insecurity by the end of 2020. And then Andy, as some of you maybe work with them, the Aspen Network for Development Entrepreneurs, they reported in a recent survey that 42% of small and growing businesses globally risk failure within the next 6 months. So I know everyone knows that this is a heavy topic, but I think starting to see the aggregate statistics come out, and it's not just about now, but of course, recovery and resilience. So what we did, we as the GIIN are serving as a secretariat to the R3 Coalition, and I'm leading that secretariat, but it is a collaboration, and you'll see this soon, across networks, their impact investors, and is supported by some leading foundations in the US. And essentially, the R3 Coalition is aiming to streamline impact investments that are going to address those huge social and environmental consequences of COVID-19. So next slide describes in more detail our objectives, or actually the supporters and the partner network. So I mentioned it's an industry response. So there are 6 US-based foundations that help initially to financially support the launch of this initiative. And it is engaging 12 different partner networks. And each of these networks have a formal membership within them. And I believe some of you may already be familiar with them. I already mentioned Andy, B Lab. We have counterparts, Asian Venture Fund Network. And then some of them focus on a particular type of investor, some focus regionally. And again, the GIIN has the honor of serving as a secretariat. What the partner networks are doing is activating their own impact investors within their membership. We, as the GIIN, have a membership body, but we realize, of course, since this is a global crisis, we wanted to reach across our partner networks to activate an even stronger response. In terms of details, let's move on to those. That's next slide. The overall objectives, so the 3 R's, of course, response, recovery, resilience. We're aiming to accelerate the immediate response in the crises, and we realize that that is happening at different levels, particularly with the health crisis, which then, of course, caused the economic crisis. And we, are all of us probably disheartened to see that there still is an increase in many regions. We're seeing Brazil in particular as one of those hotspot areas. So I am also hoping to get some insights from any of you that are familiar with the market to better understand what could be done in terms of investment capital, particularly within that hotspot region. But we also want to think about recovery as the pandemic subsides, and then building back better, as some people have said, thinking about resilience post-COVID. We're going to do that through coordinating and accelerating impact investments towards priority financing needs. And when I say we, it is not only the funders and the partner networks, but absolutely, and at the heart of it, the impact investors and the investors. Generate market intelligence. I'll talk a little bit more about that around financing needs and investor strategies that can address those financing needs. And then disseminating to a wider audience. So it won't just be about the R3 investors, but taking the learnings from the R3 Coalition and hoping to take that and amplify it wider to the wider financial markets. The next slide focuses on the next 6 months. R3 Coalition, admittedly, we came together quickly. I think we took about 3 weeks to get the partners together after we knew that we had funding support to launch it. And so we admittedly say this is an experiment and could be a new way of partner networks and impact investors coming together to coordinate and accelerate. It's not the first time that our community is collaborating, and I'm including all of you, but it could be a new way of us thinking about how to address this global crisis. And so we're entering it thinking about it in two phases. One is a testing phase for the next 6 months. And we're asking anyone who's coming on, whether they're the partner networks or the impact investors, to consider engaging in the various activities, giving feedback to iterate for the next 6 months. And that specifically includes, and the next 2 slides after this will go into the activities, but it specifically includes surfacing impact investment opportunities that exist and also available capital. It includes being diligent about talking to experts within any one of the areas that we want to prioritize to make sure that we're not coordinated across just the finance industry, but pulling on other sectors that may be helpful in informing our collective response. We'll bring it together with virtual investor convenings, which I'll go into a little bit more detail in the next slide. And then I mentioned the knowledge exchange, so participating in knowledge exchange opportunities and contributing to briefs that are coming out of the R3 coalition. And then finally, I just wanted to reemphasize having an openness of iteration and iterating on the types of activities, the way we operate together for those who are getting involved. The next slide, the next 2 slides go into the 2 activities that we are initially launching, but open to doing others, again, in name of our ultimate objective to better coordinate and accelerate impact investments. So the first are any of the investors that express interest in the R3 coalition, they'll be invited to virtual investor convenings. And these are the features behind it. So they're intended to bring co-investment opportunities to peers. And again, talking about acceleration. So if you want to envision them, the way that they may work, or that they'll work, is that we'll have impact investments that address and affect effects of COVID. The other features about those investments that we would welcome are that they could be direct or indirect, such as through funds or vehicles, that they could be across different asset classes, and specifically they are investments, so they're seeking some sort of financial return, but it could be anywhere from below to above risk-adjusted market rate returns. I'll just specify that this won't be a conversation for grants, but it will be investments. Each of the sessions, these convenings, will be thematically organized so that investors can opt in based on their investment objectives. The initial themes that we're exploring, and maybe I'll put another seed for when we have our discussion, if there are other themes within the Latin American context that we should also be considering. But for now, initial themes that are being explored are a few around health interventions. So that could include the distribution of critical med supplies. For example, I'm going to be talking to a fund manager on Monday or Tuesday that has a portfolio company that needs capital to expand their capabilities for sending out testing kits within the Brazilian market. Another telemedicine, and a third health-related wash intervention, so access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And then another group of investments that we're seeing, and I had heard that statistic about what the World Food Program has projected as people who potentially will be faced with hunger in 2020, but there's food security investments that are popping up that are addressing some aspect of an agricultural supply chain that has been broken and now leading to food insecurity. And then finally, of course, education technology, given just the changing landscape of brick and mortar schools not being able to convene. Education technology has been another area that we're seeing. And I heard a lot of tech investors on this call, so interested to hear if there's other angles that you're seeing that are addressing COVID directly. And then in terms of the session, the first series of sessions will be short presentations. We'll ask investors who are already in an investment opportunity, whether they're an investor or diligencing an investment, would actually come and present for a very short presentation, about 10 minutes, on that investment opportunity that they feel that they're already in and want other peers to come into that investment. The GIIN will also facilitate follow-up meetings as needed with the group of investors that may express interest in that investment that's presented. And then finally, we want technical experts as needed to be part of these conversations to help guide and inform some of the progress that we're trying to make. I'll go into, I think we have 2 more slides. I'll go to the next one, which is around the knowledge, or the knowledge piece, or the research agenda for the R3 Coalition. So I had mentioned that one of the objectives is to generate information so we can reach an even wider audience of the financial community, not just isolated to the R3 participants. So we'll be releasing a series of issue briefs. I noted one at the top of this presentation, which would include a landscape of the impact, or a landscape analysis, the state of the impact investing market, what's happening during COVID-19, and start laying out some of the main challenges that investors are facing. So I'm sure this resonates with many of you. The next series of issue briefs will then go more deeply into one of those challenges to take a closer look about why that's happening, what different ways investors are starting to address those challenges, and perhaps some vignettes about specific interventions that investors are taking right now. So that could include deal sourcing, due diligence, and capital deployment as another brief. That actually will be the second brief that's coming out. Restructuring to support existing investments or portfolios, and then the use of non-financial support for investees will likely be a 5th brief, but we're, again, in the spirit of learning and iterating, we're open to adjusting some of these topics as we go through and operationalize the R3 Coalition. And then finally, in terms of engagement opportunities, the R3 participants are being invited to participate in these knowledge building efforts. So for example, next week we are hosting some focus groups on due diligence, and I'm happy to share that via Susanna if any of you would like to join, to come together with your peers and talk about how you may be either being faced with challenges towards due diligence or want to share how you're still conducting due diligence in light of a changing landscape and market. And then my next slide, if you are wondering the roles and expectations of the investors getting involved, we're asking folks to come with a problem-solving mindset and openness to a new way of operating. And that's all in the name of trying to accelerate financing towards these solutions that are addressing either the health and or economic consequences that COVID has created. That there's a willingness to share these opportunities with peers, or if you have available capital to share a bit more on what the features of that capital looks like, your investment parameters. There's a piece about contributing to the knowledge generation, as I mentioned in the last slide. There's the ongoing thread of making sure that the information and the activities are informed by technical experts for any of the given fields. And then we are talking about impact investing. So this idea of maintaining the integrity of impact investing, we've already heard people use the term COVID washing. So investments that maybe are being repurposed and being positioned as affecting COVID, but maybe don't necessarily have that tie. So in maintaining impact, we will be looking for investments that do have a way to articulate and demonstrate that a positive social environmental effect will be pursued. And of course, that it's also addressing a specific area that COVID has caused. So I think my last slide, and then I will definitely open it up for questions. I don't think anyone's chatted any in, but if you wanted to start thinking about those questions for me, we can do a combination of me fielding some questions as well as really hearing your thoughts and reactions to COVID, or what you're seeing within your respective markets, some of those discussion questions. But essentially, and I think all of you fall within the first bullet, potentially, as an investor. But I know that you all also wear a lot of hats as ecosystem builders for the Latin America financial markets, and it sounds like an angle particularly towards social entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs. But that said, if you're an investor, we are asking those who have co-investment opportunities or are looking to still deploy capital to address the COVID crisis, that we do have an investor form. I don't think you'll be able to click on this link, but the link is at the bottom of these slides, and I can also circulate it afterwards if you to get involved. There's a short form to fill out. If you also, because you could wear multiple hats, are seeking funding, we're asking those folks, because I had mentioned that investors would be presenting. So it would ask you to talk to your investors about participating in R3 Coalition as the ones who would be presenting you or your firm or your company as a co-investment opportunity. And then the network piece, Susan, I've been talking about, what could this look like with WeInvest as you're coming together as a officially formal entity. So that would fall under the partner network side. I have an email that's here, but I can also send my own email through chat. We have a hashtag on social media as well. And you can find us at the GIIN on Twitter. And I believe that concludes the main pieces of my presentation. There's questions in the final slide. I think I put back up the discussion questions for all of you. So we don't have to necessarily keep those up the entire time, because I know that it's always nicer to see people's faces if they're already on video.
So I have one question, yeah. Just of a recap. So let's say I'm interested in getting involved. The first thing I have to do is to fill out the interest form that we are going to distribute the PowerPoint, and in there you can click and you can go to the interest form. And then what? I wait, in there I say my companies are in this line and sectors, and I wait for you to contact us. Can you walk us through that again, just to make it very clear?
Yep, that's great. Yeah, great question. And I think Sylvia, thank you. She dropped in the investor interest form link into the chat. So if you felt like looking at that as we're speaking, but yes, so we're collecting and aggregating. We've had over almost 110 investors sign up and share information that they're willing to share on if they have co-investment opportunities that they'd want to bring to the investor convenings, as well as information if they are looking to invest their capital in COVID response. So our next step has been pulling together investments that we're seeing in investment forms, as well as we're having one-on-one conversations with investors and other networks to help surface different opportunities that fit within a particular theme. And we're doing this on a rolling basis, or we'll do it on a rolling basis. So once we identify maybe 5 to 10 investments around any of these particular themes, we'll then announce the investor convenings over email, and this form helps to collect that data. So one example that I can give to Suzanne is I can forward the email that we sent to, and I think Luciana, you got it yesterday. I can forward the email that we shared with all of the investors that signed up that actually lays out what are the next steps. So we're trying to keep an open dialogue on what the timing looks like for these investor convenings, and also there's an invitation to participate in focus groups. So we will, maybe a short way of answering your question also, once there is potentially an investment opportunity that aligns with a theme, we'll be reaching out one-on-one to talk to that investor to just make sure they understand what we want them to be presenting on, share the template slides for them to consider on if they're able to share that information and provide it. So we prepare them almost like a regular convening that you would have, that you'd want to be prepared as a speaker. Hopefully that answered your question, but I'm happy to go elaborate.
No, I think it's very clear now, and it's almost like now investors are on the hot seat, not the entrepreneurs.
Yes.
So, any other questions?
I have a question. Just to be clear on how you're looking at any issues with COVID washing. So for instance, I see here you have, well, health interventions probably are more clear, but let's, food security or education technology. So if it is like a platform that works for education technology, and of course now it became anything related to education technology is more relevant because it's necessary. So it's the only way to provide education. But so just do you need like a connection, a tight connection to addressing a problem that is COVID related, or this is, any education platform,
That's a great question.
that is an impact investment that measures impact and all that would qualify?
Lucianne, that's a great question. And I don't have the definitive answer. And I think right now we're iterating on what that means, but we'd want the investor who's coming and saying they're motivated to address a response to say, what does that education technology intervention, how does that tie and address something that happened in terms of education access because of COVID? And likely it would be about education access in a community in need, maybe as opposed to thinking, maybe it is about, who has access to education, socioeconomic breakdown. We haven't quite, that's a great question. We haven't quite had to address that because usually it's more obvious, but I think we'll have to scrutinize a little bit more on if there really is a link to directly addressing an effect of COVID. So I guess one example could be, did they shift their customer base as a result, or are they still serving the same customers before COVID? And then that case, maybe, it's still an impact investment, but it might not be addressing a need brought about by COVID. Maybe this isn't education technology, but for food security, there was an investor who asked about a company that was working in an emerging market with smallholder farmers to produce organic grain that then gets exported to the European Union. And I mean, it is an impact investment, but it's not necessarily addressing food insecurity. So I hope that gives an example. So that likely we wouldn't put into the R3 platform because it's not a direct effect that's causing food insecurity. But those companies were affected from an economic standpoint. So if we looked at relief financing for smallholder farmers, then maybe that would be a theme. That might not be fully satisfying, and
no, I think it's
maybe
great.
you and I can have okay.
Yeah, no, this is exactly, that's exactly the kind of, great examples.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions coming from investors? Don't be shy.
Which is fun.
Yeah.
You can end, but you also have contact details. Here, I'll also put my email.
Yeah. Good.
Oh, perfect.
I have a question, Katrina. Are you guys creating kind of a portal where all of this will be trackable and sort of easy for the investors to see the progress towards some of these fundraising goals? And
That's a great question. Thank you. That question. We aren't adding a tech platform that the GIIN as a secretary R3 will launch, but I am in touch with a number of different tech platforms that are doing the matchmaking or holding that type of information. Abaca has created a piece of their site. This is led by Sorensen Impact Foundation as well as Village Capital that have social enterprises. They have a segment that's specifically addressing issues of COVID. So we're talking to them about, is there an integration piece there? Kathy Clark has also, she sits at Duke University. She's been collecting a whole database around One would be around cash resources and grants, but the other one is around debt relief for entrepreneurs. We've been talking to her just because she's built an infrastructure. And then today I talked with Artha Initiative just very briefly. They're based in Switzerland and India, and they have a platform. So short answer is that we ourselves will not be doing a tech platform, but we are thinking about, do we need tech solutions to really amplify this? So if you have additional perspective, it sounds like perhaps, or if you've seen other platforms that have kind of followed along the progress of fundraising, even in a group setting, I'd be very happy to hear about that.
Great. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Julia, yeah, that's okay.
Oh, no.
Megan, go ahead. I didn't know if Julia, were you hopping in? I didn't want to, if you wanted to respond.
No, I mean, I was just curious because there's so many things going on. It's hard to keep track of everything. I think that there's someone from IBD Lab on the line, but I think the IBD was also collecting a lot of this for the Latam market. So maybe there's a way to kind of also
good idea.
List of resources.
Megan?
Yeah.
That actually sort of ties into what I was going to ask, which is you mentioned that these calls will be thematic, but I wondered if they might also be regional. Because while, of course, there are definitely investors who are investing globally, you know, we, for example, are focused exclusively on Latin America, and I would imagine that I know there are quite a few investors who are, you know, focused a little bit more geographically, and so just curious about that.
Yep. Great question. We know that that is absolutely an investment parameter. Is in a way it falls under the deal breakers that investors can articulate that pretty easily. On the investor interest form, we have collected for those who do global capital, where are they able to allocate? The last time I checked, these are the statistics, but they might be changing. But we did see over 50%, and they could do multi-select, but over 50% into Sub-Saharan Africa. The next highest region is Latin America. I believe 40% are. So I think a bit of it is, it's a bit of a chicken and the egg. So if we have enough co-investment opportunities that are around a particular region, then I think we can segment it. But if it's the theme and there's maybe 10 and there's some in the US or North American focus and then some Latin American, we'll just be explicit about trying during the, when we do the registration, just to say, you know, this is the investment being presented by this investor. It's in X, either country or region. Maybe a little bit on, I don't know how much people will be willing to share in print for a registration, but we likely will try to do country, asset class, type of an investment, what it's addressing, so we can try to match those parameters. But if a group like this did have a theme to cover, and it was segmented for Latin America, you know, very happy to explore that as something to do together as well. So Megan, thank you for asking that.
I have another question, which is, it can be at any stage, right? From a seed investment to a Series B or C. And also, is another benefit of doing this receiving feedback from investors that may not be able to invest because of the region of the company, but at the same time can add value of saying, you know, well, I have invested in a similar company in Africa, and I can tell you that that model had these challenges. Check it out. Is that kind of also of support that you can find in other investors when you join this?
Yeah, that I'd love to maybe have an offline conversation with you about that. We hadn't thought of building in that feature, but it is a coalition, and to the extent that that sort of knowledge exchange is asked for from investors, and we have the capacity to do that, you know, very open. And again, I do want to emphasize it is about iteration on how can we create these either convenings for investors and showing investments, or in the name of knowledge exchange. So maybe you and I can talk a little bit more about what that maybe could look like, but absolutely yes to hearing investor feedback. So after each of these sessions, we likely will keep asking, you know, did that work for you? Why or why not? What would you say you'd like to change? And then we could try to adjust as we keep rolling out these convenings on a rolling basis.
Excellent. Okay, we are getting close to our time. So is there any other questions?
Yeah, I have one, and thank you for the presentation. And I didn't know much about GIIN, and I've been looking at your website while you've been talking. And you know, from what I see, both the investor profiles and the investment profiles seem, you know, like large organizations and very macro-oriented. Many are foundations, and not really the profile of the group that's on this call. And I wonder how does it actually work if someone submits something? I mean, is there a bulletin board? I mean, how do you connect people if someone has an investment or an interest, or they're looking for co-investment? Do you have a way to connect these? Does your back office somehow connect these?
Thank you for.
Or is there a form we have?
Thank you for your.
Or, you know, how does the machine work?
Yeah, no, great question. And we may keep updating this as more and more investors join. I'll answer the functionality, and then I did want to go to the investors that are involved just to maybe clarify that. But for the functionality right now, the way that we're trying to surface investment opportunities and then have that find investors that are interested in investing are through those virtual convenings that I mentioned. The co-investment opportunities that are getting surfaced are largely through that form that was sent in the chat function. And then also we've been having side conversations with other networks that are maybe doing similar ways of surfacing these co-investment opportunities. And then those will come into a convening that investors will be invited to join. And there is where they can indicate if they want to learn more about the investment. And then the GIIN could follow up to convene if there's a quorum of investors to then meet again to help them just come together to ask questions, either the investor or potentially it would be directly to the company or the fund. And we wanted to offer a second follow-up meeting because, you know, we've heard a lot of strain on potentially the investees to have so many bilateral conversations with potential investors. So we're hoping to figure out if that would be welcomed by an investor group in the name of creating more efficiencies. Maybe just a little bit on the types of investors that are coming into the R3 Coalition. And thank you for asking about the GIIN. The GIIN is one of 12 different member body organizations that are part of the coalition. With the GIIN, we do span the entire range of the supply side of capital, from investors, family offices and foundations, to the asset managers, largely private equity funds, small to very large. And then the ecosystem builders, in a way, the consultants, the law firms, also are invited into our membership. In this case, it would be the investors for the R3 Coalition. So that's our membership. We also have other partner networks who have family offices and foundations within their networks as well, so they're coming to the table. Right now, there's about 50% are asset managers who have signed up for the R3 Coalition. The next biggest group are foundations and family offices. And the remaining group are folks that don't meet refit. There's DFIs, the development financial institutions. There's a handful of them that have come into it, as well as diversified financial institutions. So those on the bigger side. So we do have a mix. And so through these investor convenings, there likely will be a mix as well, showing from different sizes to different types of stages of investment. But thank you for your question, Glenn.
Thanks.
Thank you. Yes. Thank you, Katrina, for your presentation. Do you have success cases already that you can describe? How much, what's the size of the investment and the kind of company and investors and all that?
So Sylvia, we actually launched on May 12th. So we're still in operationalizing mode. We're about 3 weeks in, so we're now surfacing. I'm hoping that we'll be able to announce our first investor convening either next week or the following, which will likely either be health interventions that range telemedicine, general health access, distribution of critical supplies, and or a WASH theme around access to water and sanitation. So hopefully, maybe in 3 weeks, I can come back to you and let you know and answer your question. But we are just putting everything together in the past few weeks.
And do you have thank you. And do you have a minimum or amount or of investment or a maximum?
No, thank you for asking that too. We don't. No. At the moment, we're opening it up. And just given the profile of the range of investors, we assume we will be seeing different amounts as well come in.
And some of the investors, do they provide debt as well? Because some of the companies right now may be looking more for a bridge financing if they are good companies, not these guys and their COVID problems. Okay, so loans as well.
Yes. Debt, equity, debt is actually in the investor survey. The last time I checked, debt is most used, then private equity. And then there's, I think, quasi-equity instruments.
Okay. Great.
Hi, this is Carmen. Question, does the company have to be incorporated in a certain jurisdiction? How are you thinking about that?
That's a great question. At the moment, no, because this is a global effort. And so at the moment, because there's investors from all over the world, they right now they haven't indicated, or we haven't collected what the specific jurisdictions would be that they're able to invest in. So also not an area that has a restriction at the moment. Thank you for asking.
So maybe we are 5 minutes away. Do you have, Katrina, a question to the group before we ask everybody to to turn on the video and take a picture?
Oh, that's great. Well, it is about, how all of you are doing, and that's more than a 5-minute conversation. But if there's someone maybe, and particularly with an eye, I'll say maybe you can argue there's of course so many financing needs, but if there is anyone focus on Brazil or the surrounding countries or other countries that are likely going to see a rise of affected cases, or maybe are being faced with hardship in particular versus others. I don't mean to compare, but I am wondering if you wanted to provide your perspective to me and to all of your fellow investors here to consider what's happening within your particular country or region. Maybe I'd welcome that as a Viviana. It looks like you'll jump in. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your presentation, and I think it's a very it's a very high rich project that you have at hand. Definitely Bolivia, we're being very hardly hit. Bolivia's economy is based on informality. 63.4% of Bolivia's economy is based on informality. That means that millions of people do not have access to healthcare, and millions of families right now are not getting the day's end meet. We have a lot of challenges ahead. All private and public hospitals are already full. There is no space. There are no more ventilators available, so nobody can get sick at this moment. And we are just starting the peak. We're just starting to climb and we are already flexibilizando. We're already not being that flexibilized. It's not flexibilizing, no? That word doesn't exist. We're already being more flexible on the measures. So some industries already opening, but look at the moment that they're opening. So the challenges ahead are going to be quite big. We've been talking with private equity funds, and Susana was there, and also Marta with some private equity funds. And actually, this is the perfect moment to start talking with them so they can actually allocate some percentage of their funds, maybe closed funds, into reacting towards finding these solutions. And I think they would be very open in talking to how to do it. I think they need some guidance and advice on how to do it and where to start. Yeah, definitely. So thank you for your time.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that.
Viviane,
I'm sorry to hear.
Sorry. Now, I wanted to call on Viviane because how is Paraguay doing? You're on mute.
Yeah. Hello. Well, in respect of health, we are doing very, very well.
Okay.
We started the first day we got the first infected, the government closed everything. So we are having a good development of the sickness, but the economic problem is arising very, very heavily. So one question I was about to ask Katrina is, I see that you are mentioning some areas like health, all the areas you mentioned that this coalition could help. But how about the areas that help independent people in work that can be done during this pandemic time? I haven't seen that in the description of the type of projects that you were going to address. And I think it's a very good time to invest or to help develop some independent work that can be done during this period.
I'll just note that the areas that I initially presented on, please consider them initial. So we'll keep rolling out topics as we see a coalescing around financing need, investment product, and investor interest. So, and I realize that we're now at time, but if we could get in touch, I'd love to hear more about where you're seeing investment opportunities that are addressing the economic effects for individuals. I'd just like to understand that, but I know that we're at the top of the hour. So Susanna, maybe we can talk about being connected after this.
Sure, absolutely. Now, since we have to leave, before saying goodbye, and thank you, Katrina, for this presentation. If everybody can turn on the video and we can take a picture to really, I like making history and seeing moments that are history in the making. When you have a group of women investors trying to look for impact, that is, for me, history.
And allies, Carlos as well.
Yeah, everybody, don't be shy. Ana Laura, Jimena, Viviana.
Carlos.
We are only missing 3, Jimena, Rebecca, and I don't know who is Terra Global. I don't know if it is, otherwise you'll just, okay, I give you, okay, we'll take it now as it is. Okay, well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you. I have to also say that great minds sometimes think alike and other times don't. But in this case, Luciana approached me talking about this initiative when I was looking into it through my Capria connections and thinking, I have to do something. But thank you, Luciana. And that's the kind of initiative we want from all of you, to let us know of other ideas, to reach out to us, to fill out all the surveys that Marta now has explained to us how to do it, so you can get your companies listed there, and we really can formalize more and more what started as a WhatsApp group, and it's gonna be a powerful force as we exchange 8 years later is. So thank you to all. and stay tuned for the next one. And we'll put this in the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
That's why we recorded, and then we'll send you the presentation and anything else that Katrina will share with us.
Thank you so much. Yes. Happy Friday, everyone. Nice to see everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.